Brian, we're going to talk about something today that Elon Musk told us not to talk about. Is that okay?
He didn't tell me not to talk about
Oh,
it,
he didn't
so I
specifically
think I'll
send
be
you a note.
okay.
I see. Okay.
No, no.
Well, before we get into that, though, because I'm going to use this for the thumbnail, Tesla did almost hit 260 this morning and got rejected
Mm-mm.
like a teenage boyfriend. Got rejected at 259 and change. So we're just exactly as the guy who gets it right twice a day, Randy has been talking about, probably going to get rejected at 260. I didn't think it had happened today, but it did. Now, do you have any thoughts at all about what happens next? Do we get another try at 260? Does it plow through? Do we get kind of have to really retrace a bit before we really get another run? What do you think?
So there's the three factors to consider in the stock market movements. There's the very short-term traders, the algos, and those aren't looking, they don't care if your company is going to be around tomorrow. They want to know what it's going to do in the next 5 minutes or 5 seconds.
Right.
So those guys, they've got numbers they're looking to hit. They're looking at velocity. They're looking at momentum. They're looking at volumes. They're looking at everything. Ignore them completely. They don't care. If they think it's going to go down in the next 5 minutes, they'll short for 5 minutes. They're very good at that. The next is the institutional investors. Well, when you've got a big run up, they will put in sell orders. Some of them say, we don't want to have more than 1% or 5% or whatever percentage in a stock. And if it has a big rally, they will trim because that's what they need to do. That's how they rebalance. Lock in those short-term gains, show your short-term thinkers that, oh, look, this quarter we were up, 3.5%. That's great. We beat the market. That's very rare for a managed fund to do. And then you've got us, the retail investors,
10
and the
million
retail investors,
strong. 10 million
10
strong.
million,
Yeah.
10 million strong. But so much of us are all-in investors who aren't selling at any price, no matter what. Well, towards the edges of that, you'll have people who say, well, if it does get below this, I am going to sell it and just sit it out until the next rally. Or if it does get above this, I'm going to take a little bit of profit because I might have something else I want to put it into. But those are not going to be big movers. So what's actually moving the stock at any given time? As this morning, with just a few hours into trading, Tesla had already moved as many shares in the market as they did in a whole day back before the recent run up. So there is a lot of trading activity. It's not just that the holders are holding and the limited number of buyers are stuck having to fight over what few shares are actually moving. There's a lot moving. So people are buying and selling. We don't know who, but focus has once again turned back to Tesla.
Now you covered all the stuff that had to do with the kinds of traders, but then there's the fundamentals. There's the fundamentals of the entire economy, the fundamentals of the stock market, and then the fundamentals of Tesla. And this is where Elon has asked us to shut our mouths, but he did do it generally, not specifically. And that had to do with one of my favorite topics, Juniper. So what the heck is going on with Juniper? Do you know anything I don't? I've been trying to find out what I can find out. What do you know?
Well, I know that we have seen the spy shots. It is out for road testing. This was the big indicator we were waiting for. And of course, it happened. I've seen people say, oh, that means we're getting it in a month or 3 months. No, it does. It definitely doesn't mean that. If you look at the timeline in the past, for example, with the Model 3, we saw the first shots in April, and in September, it was released in China. And then in Q1, it was released in the US. So you're looking at 5 months-ish from first spotting to China deliveries, and more like 8 months from first sighting to US deliveries. What we know is that it could be as quick or quicker than it was with the Model 3 because of parts commonality. It's got a lot of the same parts. With the Model 3 refresh, it needed a new steering wheel. It needed a new interior completely. It needed a lot of things. But with this, it doesn't need as much. And the Model Y is already more advanced than the Model 3 was, so there's less remaining to change. They don't have to do big changes to catch it up with where the Model 3 is as of its refresh. There's only 4 panes of glass left in the Model Y that are not already laminated glass, and that's uh, the rear side windows and the rear back corner windows. That's it. Everything else is already double pane. So, but the shapes could be slightly different. Okay, fine. They had no problem with that on the Model 3. Um, we expect to see the infotainment, the armrests, the seats. A lot of it is going to all be in common, which is one of the reasons I haven't seen the parts showing up on the parts side. And the other is because my Bobs have moved, one retired and one moved to another company. So if you're a Bob who sells bibs and bobs and would like to give me information that you probably shouldn't, I'm here for it. Get in touch.
So when we were looking at the Model 3 refresh, the Highland as it's been called, did we see the spy car originally in the US or in China? Did we?
The US, we saw it in the US. We never saw it on the road in China.
Interesting.
Part of that could be a tighter protection on leaks,
Right.
but the more likely answer is they're on a different internet than us. They do not use the same social media that we do in the same ways that we do. And unless you are following Chinese language social media sites, it could be very easy to miss. I expected people like Tesla Chan and Wuwa and others to leak it over, to share it in that way. Hasn't happened. But maybe we just aren't seeing it. But it's reasonable to assume that this was road tested in China. Maybe they did it in a place where people just don't
Go.
don't pay attention and see what it is or care.
So you have so then Elon says he responded right away on this one. He said, "Look, shut up about this Juniper because it's not going to come out in 2024." Well, he said this year, so I'm
Mhm.
assuming he means 2024. So it's not going to come out this year. So that gave us one clue. But he didn't say it's not going to come out in the first quarter, which is my recollection is he had originally said that the Highland or the Juniper refresh, or he didn't call it that probably, that the Model Y refresh would come out in early 2025. So do you have any speculation? Will we follow the pattern of the Model 3 and be China first and then the US? Or do you think we might get more? Do you think we might build them in Berlin this time as opposed to even building them in Shanghai?
Well, they would build them everywhere. The Model 3 is a high volume car, but it's not as high volume as the Model Y. And I suspect that they'll want to get all factories changed over as quickly as they can, which presents a whole new batch of challenges. You'd rather roll it out in one place first. I do expect China would be the place to do that. China's very good at that sort of thing. They can move very quickly and have proven so time and again. So I would expect to see the Model Y first hit China and then very quickly hit all the other factories. And I suspect that they would do what we saw with the Model 3, which is start with 1 or 2 trims while they're getting rid of the old inventory. They may stop making the rear wheel drive Model Y so that that can be the first refresh Model Y that they make, and they can just stockpile the other ones for the people who want long range or third row or performance while they get the lines up to speed. And they have enough lines that they don't have to shut off they don't have to shut off all the existing lines. They can do like they did with the Model 3, and continue making the old one side by side with the new one while the transition is underway, and just differentiate the models by feature, so that people will continue buying the pre-refresh model.
So then this brings up my question that I ask you all the time, but I'm going to ask it again. If we have a refresh Model Y in the first quarter, if we already have the refreshed Model 3 and sales seem to be doing very well, especially now the performance in the United States at least, and we're going to have this 2.5 vehicle also first quarter of next year, maybe second quarter, but somewhere around there. And then we've got the actual cyber cab vehicle. What if the Model 3 is a bigger hit than we're thinking as things move along? And what if the big Model Y really does what I think it will do when it is refreshed? I think it'll just go crazy. Then what if, I don't think it'll be Osborne by this new vehicle at all. That's just me. Well, somewhat. And then we have another model, which is going to be ramping, and we're expecting it to be the $4 million unit vehicle. And then we have the cybercab. Do we have the room to do all of this in Austin and in Berlin and in Shanghai? I mean, where are you going to do all this stuff?
So in the existing factories, we have a lot of unused capacity. Fremont is just about tapped out. Shanghai is just about tapped out. All the others have tremendous room to expand within their existing footprint. So Berlin could substantially increase volume. Berlin, I'm wondering if we're going to see Model 3 production move there now that there are China tariffs on the Model 3 from China. But the government officials went to Shanghai to tour the factory and see how the cars are built, get all the information they needed to determine the actual tariff rate. It could be that the tariff rate is only 10, 15%. If that's the case, the motivation to build in Shanghai, to build the Model 3 in Berlin is much lower. But if they say, nope, you're at the 28%, we could see a shift like that. I don't think Tesla qualifies at the 28% level. I think they qualify at a much lower level, but I don't know all the finer details to make that definitive statement. So do they have the footprint? Not for the 4 million, certainly not for that. But they could, we could see one part of the Model Y line in Fremont or Texas. I mean, really in Texas, they could set up a whole Model Y 2.5 line without negatively impacting production of the full size one. So yeah, the compact could absolutely be built. The intermediate compact could absolutely be built, but the high volume one, you're not going to add 4 million units of volume to the existing factories. We would need something additional for that.
So with all of that said, in order to really start getting the numbers, because I think that you and I have talked about maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just imagining that you agreed with me, but right now maybe we're talking about 3.64 million total from all factories if they were just jamming. And that doesn't count Berlin extension, that doesn't count doing things smarter, but somewhere in that 3.6 to 4 million range is it. Don't we need to start putting in some pylons in Mexico pretty soon?
I sure hope so. So, of course, as you know, I've gotten very lucky with some of my site visits in the past. Lucid, who would not talk to me, I scored an interview with an employee who was not supposed to do that when I went there. Nicola, who had said they wouldn't talk to me, sent out an executive to be interviewed accidentally while I was there with an entire camera crew and tripods and all that. And they said, boy, we really didn't want that to be an interview. Well, I mean, you saw microphones and cameras. I don't know what to tell you. So I figured the only way to get Mexico to move is I'm going to go down there. I'm going to head down late Wednesday night. I'll be in Nuevo Leon Thursday, be there about a week and a half. And hopefully that means that they will have no choice but to begin the groundbreaking in Mexico next week while I'm there. So if you're in Monterrey and you'd like to say hello or have some information for me, please get in touch.
So you've put Elon on notice just now that you'll be
Just
down
now.
there. So therefore, you need to get the caterpillars out there. You need to get the butterflies too. Well, and that wasn't even a dad joke. That was just, no, I shouldn't have gone there. And so, all right. So then speaking of groundbreaking and steel and pylons, we were all thrilled over the weekend to learn that there's actual steel, lots and lots and lots of steel on the premises of Reno. Would you like to fill us in more on that?
Yes, it feels a little bit out of timeline. Of course, you want the foundations in first before you try and put something vertical atop them. But that doesn't mean this isn't good news. So you dig your footings, you pour the concrete, and then you wait 30 days before you can put the steel vertical. There are ways to shorten that briefly by using a higher test concrete that after only maybe 2 or 3 weeks has sufficient hardness to build on it. But that adds a significant amount of cost while only trimming your completion time by a week or two. Not worth it. Very rarely done. I don't know if I've ever seen Tesla do that. So this is very good news. All that steel is clearly of a volume that you would use for a building. It's too much for anything else. So I'm expecting to see activity there within the next month. I'm expecting to see vertical columns, hopefully this quarter. I don't think that's unreasonable, but I also don't think it would be unreasonable to expect it a year ago or
Yeah.
two.
Well, as I've noted yesterday, I live here in the distribution center capital of the world now, the Inland Empire, where they pop up million-square-foot distribution centers like McDonald's. Actually, I think we've got a couple of fast food restaurants going on up at the entrance to the freeway here, and I think they're taking longer than the distribution centers do to pop up. It's
Yes.
really
Yes. And you're right with this. This is an important point we should mention real quick is these buildings will go up faster than the factories because an automobile factory is a very specific type of machine that builds the machine, where a semi factory, if you look at all the other semi factories, they're really just warehouses where semis are assembled. I assume Tesla will do something a little more sophisticated than that, but they don't need to. They could absolutely just put up the building and go. And I think if a building of sufficient size had existed close enough to it, they would have just done that. The pilot production line is in a building that Tesla did not build themselves, but was pre-existing. You can do that, but I think we're going to see they'll want to put in their own foundations, their own footings, because there are going to be areas of this factory where I assume you're going to see very heavy equipment that will need special weight distribution considerations.
Yeah, and then if we go back to the beginning of this time together, we were talking about the stock price. And if I knew of a company that was going to build a factory, that was in the process of building a factory that had one success after another, and they were building this factory in order to create about $8 billion worth of trucks a year, I would think that it might impact my thinking about the stock. What about you?
It would, you and I follow this too closely. We follow it so closely that when good news happens like this, we're powerless to act because we're already all in. There are institutional investors who will see this, but I don't think 𝐒𝐭𝐤𝐤, the Tesla semi advocate who posts the drone footage, said, "Am I crazy to think we may see a pop on Monday because of this steel being here?" And I said, it strikes me as unlikely. These guys drive by watching out the rearview mirror. They miss all the big curves in the road. Of course they do. How could you not? And when we started this conversation, we were up a few percent. We have lost all those gains during the time we've been talking.
And we're
So
actually down a bit.
I think if the longer we talk, the more money it loses, Randy, there's
Oh,
only one thing we can do.
well, let's end this particular podcast.
Yeah,
And
and you can have me back later.
I'll have you back tomorrow, which we will record in just moments. Thank you, Brian, for bringing us all that intellectual. Well, would you consider that to be intellectual conversation? No, I don't think so.
Analytical?
Analytical, pragmatic,
Mm-mm.
economic, does that count as academia? I don't know. Well, I think we're done here, Brian.
Mhm.
And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.